Greetings, beautiful people, and welcome to the first episode of the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, brought to you by the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. I'm your host, Dr. Richard Warren Jr., an award-winning educator, speaker, and professor, also known as R.H. Warren Jr. on social media, and I am thrilled that you are here. Special shout out to our sponsors from the NEA Foundation. This is the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, a podcast for educators by educators, where we transcend the limits and unlock the true potential of education. Today, we're stepping into the halls of decision making, where school boards and state policymakers craft the policies that shape our educational landscape. Listen, these leaders play a pivotal role in determining the resources, the frameworks, and the standards that directly impact our classrooms, and more importantly, our students. So how do we, as teacher leaders, ensure that our voices are not just heard, but are influential in this critical dialogue? How do we advocate for student-affirming education, ensuring that every student has the support and opportunities that they need to thrive? In this episode, Jena and I will explore effective strategies for communicating with these key stakeholders and discussing how to present our insight and experiences in a way that resonates and drives meaningful changes in education. Jena Nelson is the 2020 Oklahoma State Teacher of the Year. In 2021, she was named top 45 educators in the nation. With the award for teaching excellence, she has been selected twice to direct at the prestigious Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Scotland, and was also chosen as a presenter in the International Music Festival in Campina Grande, Brazil. Jena has spoken at the National Academy for Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and was honored by the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy as the Lauren Choate Resilience Award winner. She served on many state and national committees, such as subcommittee member for the Oklahoma Governor Workforce Council member, Healthy Kids Coalition, Oklahoma Teacher Table Initiative, Homeless First Education Quality and Diversity Advisory Committee, and so much more. Jena is the former president of the Bipartisan Education Advocacy Training Organization and now trains public education candidates across the United States. Welcome to the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast, Jena. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Warren. It is an honor.
Yes, Les. Look, I'm reading your bio and I'm like, look, there are so many gems that you bring to the table, and I'm just honored to have this conversation with you. And like I said, we are stepping into the halls of decision makers. And we really want to kind of unpack, what does that look like for teacher leaders, and how do they go about communicating and starting the conversation? So my question for you, Jena, is for educators beginning to advocate for student-affirming education, what are the key initial steps that they should take in crafting a proposal for school boards or policymakers?
Well, the great thing about this one, work very similar to, and so we know that the basis for all great teaching is that relationship. And so starting that relationship with the policymakers is very important. Reaching out, emailing, saying hello, taking a quick meeting, letting them know that you are a person and that you are constituent, but you care about your community, you care about children, and so that they don't see you as a number, they don't see you as a profession, but they know you as a person. So that's, I think, is very, very important. The second thing is that when you're talking with, board members or legislators, you've got to make sure that you can relate to them and they can relate to you. And that means telling them the stories that you see every single day in your classroom. Not everybody is swayed by statistics. And as you know, when we teach, we talk about ethos, logos, and pathos, and how, form our rhetoric. Well, it's the same with people. And you've got to know what works with folks. And I think adding a little pinch of this and a little dash of this is important. But when we're talking about making sure that our kids get what they need to be successful, who is a better advocate than the teacher?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like a mix of several different things. You have to have your facts, but you also have your feelings, and you got to have your findings, and you got to talk future, and then you got to present your recommendations. And so you mentioned the storytelling technique. Um, how should they like craft the story to policymakers or people who look at data, or what kind of techniques do you typically use in that space?
Sure. So the first thing I like to do, because like I said, I want them to get, I do like to start out with a simple story. And don't want to divulge a lot of very private details. I want them to relate. I want them to see through my eyes when we talk about, making sure that our students get what they need. And so I tell them a very simple story to kind of begin. And you can adapt this and you can tell it however you want. But I say, when I look at this issue, I think about being in my kitchen, and I'm sitting there at the kitchen and I've got a paper towel that is too close to that stove and it catches on fire. So what do I need? I need a fire extinguisher, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That is what I need for that particular issue. But silly Gina, her house catches on fire. Do I still need that fire extinguisher? I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I need more supports. I need something that is more powerful and more effective. And it doesn't mean that I'm neglecting other people, or other people aren't getting as many resources. I'm getting what I need at that moment to be successful, to make sure that I am safe and that I'm going to be productive. And so you can take as simple stories, or you can talk about the things that matter. I like to go in, and when I talk to folks, I say, this is what you're seeing. And I understand you want to talk about test scores and you want to talk about all these things, but let's talk about the homeless rate that's in my community. Let's talk about the ACE scores that are in this community. Then the data that affect the community, because our external forces affect the internal forces within our class. You have of not just test scores, but that whole community. It is a public school. So bring those public stories and craft that issue and saying, we need to get what we need to be successful. And our partnership, and that's a key word, our partnership together can ensure that success.
Oh, I love how you said our partnership, and letting them know it's not me against you. This is us together.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times when the wise additive, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that's critical in the space of teacher leadership. A lot of times we feel like we have to be the trailblazer or the only one, and sometimes it happens that way. But it works so much better when you have different networks and channels that you can go through with people. And so my question to you is like, what channels or networks should educators utilize to ensure that their proposals or what they're trying to get done reach the right policymakers or reach the right person? What are there specific platforms that you recommend, or that they can kind of think about?
So I always say, look within your spheres of influence. So look at your community first. Where are the nonprofits? Nonprofits are constantly looking at ways to help the community. And so if you can, link up with a nonprofit, explain, some things that maybe that you're seeing, some partnerships that you'd like to develop, that's fantastic, because it really takes the weight off of those teachers of having to fulfill every single need. And it can be, and I say this in rural areas as well, because sometimes they say, well, we don't have a lot of nonprofits. But I will say this as someone who has worked with a lot of nonprofits, that if you contact people in your bigger metropolitan areas, because they are constantly applying for grants that say things like, well, we need you to work with rural areas, they will come to you. They will help you. So that's one partnership. One is another thing is that whenever your local candidates, school board candidates, or state reps, or state senate members, or governors, lieutenant, whoever is around is having a town hall, go there, listen to what they have to say, talk to them, tell them your stories, tell them your student stories, your family stories, make those connections. And I know that that sometimes makes teachers feel a little awkward because I hear a lot of them say, I just don't like to think about politics. Well, here's the thing. You may not like to think about politics, but politics likes to think about you. So you need to make sure that your voice is being heard, because your students aren't going to get to meet these people. They're not going to get to walk through those doors. You have to be the one to bring their voice to that table, to that meeting, so that these people they don't look at a building and say that's a school, or they understand the stories about your students and the needs that they can address, because the people with the pen are making the laws that affect you in the classroom, that affect your students in the classroom. And a lot of them don't have a lot of information. They've been out of school for a very long time. You've got to tell the story of what's happening right now.
Oh my goodness. That quote, the policy, what did you say? The policymakers might not, what was that quote? That was good.
May not like to think about politics, but politics is thinking about you.
Yes. Politics is thinking about you. That just resonated with me. And I have a question regarding that. So for a teacher who was unaware about like the political structure and different policy levers for change, such as, a policy could be an executive order. It could be a judicial action. It can be you can be commissioned or assigned to a committee. It can be a public-private partnership. It can be budget allocations. It can be regulatory actions. Like, there are so many different policy levers for change. But based on your experience, what policy levers are the most effective for educators to use when advocating for student-affirming education reforms?
I think that it's important to watch and studies. Whenever your legislators start talking about this before sessions start, they're going to have all kinds of studies. Maybe it's even the summer before session starts. Pay attention. And if you see something that speaks to your expertise, reach out to that legislator and say, hey, I see you're talking about this. I'd love to give you my opinion, or go and sit in on that. And then later write letters and follow up. Go back and talk to your teacher friends, talk to your community and say, this is concerning for me, or this is very exciting for me, because, they are going to be pulling people that may or may not be from your community. And they need to hear all points of view, because they are going to be writing laws that affect everyone. And if you're not there to speak up and have your say, and to make sure that they are understanding the truth, because I'm just going to be very honest with you. There are a lot of think tanks out there across the country right now that are pushing their agendas and their thoughts and their wants. And if we are not there to push back, or to accept or reaffirm this, it affects us directly. It may not really affect them, but it affects us. And so we have to be part of that conversation. Our job as educators is to sometimes, unfortunately now, it's not just to stay within the walls of your school. You cannot be complacent in your pedagogy. You cannot be complacent in your empathy, and you can't be complacent in your advocacy.
Yes, complacency is the enemy of evolution. That was one of the things that I've learned a long time ago. Complacency is the enemy of evolution. And if you stay where you are, then you will never get to where you need to get, so to speak. And so when we think about that quote and what you just talked about, I kind of want to tap into building coalitions, right? And building support. How important is building a coalition or support network when you're advocating for that student affirming education? What tips do you have for educators to build that?
it is so important. It is so important. And if you look within your community, you're going to see folks that are going to share the same values, whether it is, these coalitions that deal with feeding kids, making sure kids aren't hungry, or making sure that kids aren't homeless, or making sure that kids have books. There are little pockets of people every single where, even in some of our religious institutions, people that you go out to and say, we need your help, because I am approaching this from an education, but I know point of view, but I know that you have these connections within those walls, that people listen to you, and you don't want to go alone. And sometimes that relationship that that person already has with that legislator, with that school board member, is going to open a door and allow you to walk through and express your expertise. They validate you in a way, and you're validating them as well, and saying, this is not just about the teacher being upset, or the teacher wanting this or wanting more. It is about a coalition of community that cares about kids and wants to make sure that we have everything we need to grow as a community, as a society, and as a country.
Man, absolutely, absolutely. And so some people may be wondering, okay, I got this coalition, I got this support. When I get in front of the board member, when I get in front of the policymaker, how can I speak their language but still stay true to my language, right? So like, what kind of data? So we're going to talk about presenting data and evidence. What kind of data or evidence do you think resonates most with school boards and policymakers when having these type of conversations? And how should educators present this information? I know you talked about stories, but specifically, like, what types of data do you feel like, or evidence you feel like, really resonates with school boards and policymakers?
I think that definitely anything that you can pull from your community. So we talked a little bit about, the A scores. Talk about your poverty rates. Talk about, the statistics of where your kids are coming from. What does your neighborhood look like? Bring that to help craft the story. Now, you don't want to be too data heavy, because they're going to get lost. Because here's what I want to remind people. The people that are elected come from all walks of life, and they may or may not have the understanding or the language that we use. So, one of the things that I like to do is that whenever I'm meeting with someone, I like to see what their background is. Because just like a good teacher, and you look at each kid on an individual level and you say, okay, I need to learn to speak your language so that we can communicate. I'm going to figure out what is the best way to teach you. That individualization that we do as educators, do that when you're talking to them. So if you know that they're coming back from a law background, absolutely, give them more facts and figures. If they're coming from a more agricultural background, explain to them, the impact that it could make, in their particular area, and speak their language. I think that if we come off to uh, with just too much information, it's going to just, it overwhelms them. It overwhelms them. But if you can come with good stories and a good heart, making sure that you are constantly reiterating that this is a partnership. I can't say that enough, because I think a lot of times when people go to see legislators or school board members, they're hot and heavy. They're ready. They're ready. Remember that you have to evoke that sense of calm, just like you do in your classroom, that you can still be passionate and you can still be caring, but you need to make sure that they're hearing past that passion, and that you are resonating, that message is resonating with them. So get to know their background a little bit.
You know, that's so important, that we don't miss the mark trying to meet the mark. And I think about this, especially for teacher leaders. I'm glad you put that in perspective, because as a teacher, our job with our students is to make sure they feel seen, heard, validated, respected, represented, and that they feel like they can achieve the ultimate goal that you want them to achieve. Right? And
Right.
so the same skills that we use in the classroom are almost the same skills we need to use in the school boardroom or with policymakers. If we can craft up a message in a way that helps them to feel seen, heard, validated, and respected, yet at the same time understand the significance of helping our students, their children, perhaps their grandchildren, perhaps their community members feel seen, heard, validated, and respected, right? If we can craft that up in a way that connects with them, then I
Yes.
think we're more likely to, one, help them to understand where we're going, and two, help them to empathize with what we're talking about, and three, help them to feel empowered to make a decision in your favor. So I think that's important. If you want to chime in, you can chime in. I just think that's so important.
It is very important. And that's one of the reasons that I truly believe that educators make some of the best politicians. Uh, and really serve the needs of the community, because you're so used to serving the needs of your students at every single level. I like to think of them as like your little your students are like little constituents. And so those of you who decide to go and you run for office and you think, I don't think I have the skills, of course you do. Of course you have the skills to help people and be empathetic and make good decisions. We make thousands of decisions every single day. Those decisions affect our students. And as I'm seeing a lot of people run for office that are former educators or educate, and they'll always be educators. I like to remind them that it's the same process of relationship and caring and individualization, and making those good, hard, right decisions every single day.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I know in theory what we're talking about, it can appear to be easy, right? It can appear to be
Well,
maybe this one track, or what we're saying is like it's just going to happen automatic. But we know that there are some challenges, right? And you're going to have to navigate some resistance and some challenges. And so, talk to me a little bit about your journey in certain situations or stories or examples. What were some of your common challenges or resistance that you faced? And what are some common challenges or resistance that educators might face when trying to advocate for student affirming education?
Well, I will tell you that I've had just about every kind of experience you can think of, and I'll go back to the first time when I first started my advocacy journey. And I want to make sure that I always say the word advocacy and not activist, because there's two different things. Advocacy is that process of working together and promoting, and activism is sometimes just holding a sign and things like that. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to those who do that, but advocacy is very different. And so when I started that, it was in the Oklahoma teacher walkout, and i I didn't know what to do except just go in and try to talk to folks. And it wasn't great at that time, because I had doors slammed in my face, and I had people who didn't want to talk to me. And so I realized that I need to change the way that I approach this. And so, I put on my teacher suit, and I made appointments. And if I couldn't get an appointment with that one, I would just sit in there and talk to that secretary, and that person there, and just and eventually, I think she would help me out and get it. But it's that relationship building that I did. And then I started attending these town halls and just educating myself on what are they saying, what are the words. But Doc, here's something that people need to realize. Vocabulary is important. Vocabulary is being weaponized against us in education right now. So it is important for you to understand the vocabulary they're using, and then kind of flip it and say, well, actually, it's more of this. And having that conversation, I think, is very important, because sometimes we will take and I was guilty of this. They would say, words, and I would just mimic it back. And I realized I'm not getting anywhere with that. And so it's important to educate yourself on how you can reach them there. Um, Emails, cards, and then when I did get in a meeting with them, I'd send them a thank you card afterwards. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, or send a thank you email. Or even if you happen to see them out and about, the important thing is that they know you and that they're hearing from you. If there's a bill that you're not really thrilled about, send an email, make a phone call. Oh, I don't know what I should say. Say the truth. I don't really, I don't feel this way, or yes, I'm supporting this. It doesn't have to be well crafted. You don't have to be the most well spoken person on earth. Just be you and exercise your right to have that conversation. You are an American citizen. You are just as important as anyone else, and you are representing a bunch of kids in your community, and it's important for you to use that voice because they don't get to use theirs. So those are just some of the things that I do, but it's a constant thing of getting to know someone and reaching out. You may not always be successful, but it is important to keep trying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They say the race is not given to the swift, but those who endure. Listen, and I'm incredibly thankful for all of your knowledge and all of the answers to these questions. I truly believe that the person who's listening to this will have some more knowledge about, how to communicate, how to build the relationships, how to build coalitions, what kind of data to present, what kind of policy levers do they need to go through, what channels do they need to go through, and ultimately, how to navigate some of that resistance. You have a lot of experience. Is there anything that is sitting with you right now that if there was one or two things that you would want to share with a teacher leader who's really looking to talk to a school board member, or a teacher leader who's really looking to talk to a policymaker? Is there anything that you would want to leave them with that we haven't talked about?
And I'm always so many things, but I tell them that they have to do it. And that sounds terrible, and it sounds very bossy. And this is the time in the world right now that educators must find their teacher voices, and they must speak up, because so many things are being said about us. So many stories are being told about us, but we're not part of the narrative. And I love that quote about, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So you've got to be at the table and making sure that you're speaking truth to power. That no, those things are not happening in my classroom, and they're not happening in her classroom, and they're not happening in her classroom, in his classroom, in their classroom. This is the truth. This is our truth. Because right now we are on the precipice of losing our profession. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it with all honesty. There are those who would like to see public education go away. And we are the first line of defense when we say, no, this is not true. This is, and we protect our own. And then once our stories get out there and people say that, oh my gosh, my kindergarten teacher needs help right now, we build those coalitions. You're not alone. A lot of you may feel very alone right now and very overwhelmed. And I will tell you, I understand. I live in the state of Oklahoma. But every single day, I remind myself that as a teacher, I stood in the presence of perpetual hope. And they are worth fighting for. They are worth advocating for. And so is the teacher down the hall. And so is the retired teacher. Because without our public schools, our communities will fall. Schools are the heartbeat of so many communities. And once a school is gone, a community is gone. History is gone. And so for me, that's worth getting up every single day, no matter what they say and no matter what they throw at us and what kind of laws that there are. Because here's the thing, laws can be reversed, but they can't be reversed unless people stand up and make their voices heard.
Oh my goodness. Jena, thank you so much for being here today and sharing with us your expertise. It is wonderful to hear your insight, and I am amazed at the advocacy and the amazing work that you're doing. To learn more about Jena's work in education, you can follow her on social media at Jena Nelson. OK. Again, listeners, thank you for joining us for the first episode of the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast. Remember, Every conversation, every idea, and every step we take brings us closer to breaking down the barriers and unlocking the true potential of education. Meet us back in the Teaching Beyond the Barriers podcast for our next episode. Thank you so much.